call this work session to order. This is our first of 3 work sessions today. This one is only for half an hour, so hopefully we can get through it relatively quickly. There are sandwiches in the back there, and open to anybody who wants one. Please take a sandwich. Plenty back there. We're going to be talking about an ordinance to add a reasonable standard to the definition of chronic animal noise. The sponsor isn't actually here. The co-sponsor is. Suzanne, do you want to speak to this, or is there someone from the administration who wants to speak to this, or can? Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll start with introductions. Mr. Gates. Fred. Forrest Dunbar.
Suzanne LeGrand.
Felix DeGraff.
Austin Hanson.
Pete Peterson. John Weddleton.
Okay, so is there anyone here from the administration that can or wants to speak to this ordinance? Okay, I'm sorry, could we, can't quite hear you. State your name again for the record.
Ian Petco. I'm with the Anchorage Health Department.
Okay.
And we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Suzanne, Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think perhaps the Ombudsman's Office representatives may wish to speak to the history behind this ordinance. The intent is to help ferret out nuisances, and by adding a reasonable person standard. And as noted in the memorandum, right now the definition doesn't differentiate between kitten noises versus chicken noises, volume, and so on. So this would be a way to prevent people using the ordinance to harass neighbors or come forward with unreasonable claims. So it gives some judgment or flexibility to the investigator, and this would probably be a good time, actually, if you want to speak to that.
So in the May 2017, early 2018, the Ombudsman's Office.
It's hard to get a
My name is May. I'm the Deputy Ombudsman from the Ombudsman's Office. So the way that this happened, it started with an constituent contacted our office about a notice of violation for chicken noises. The violation was appealed and heard through the hearing officer, the administrative hearing office, Lisa, who heard on this case, and she ruled it in the favor of the animal care and control because the technical requirements of the code was all there. But was it fair or reasonable? And that was one of the things that we looked at. Shortly after her 30-day appeal period was over, we asked to talk to her and provide her input and opinion on this. And we believe that the definition of chronic animal noise in ANC 17.05.1010 as currently written can yield unreasonable, unfair results in some circumstances. In this situation, for one. And the definition does not take into account the nature of the vocalization, including the volume. And thus the ordinance can be used by an unreasonable person to harass his or her neighbors for a vocalization that the reasonable person would not find objectable. An animal owner for, let's say, a kitten or a chicken, if the chicken was clucking or the kitten was meowing, if it did that for 5 minutes, regardless of the volume or decibel points, they can get cited for that. And so if you have an unreasonable neighbor who happens to be recording your animals while you're not there or while they're not there, but they have it on recording, they can submit it in and potentially you can get cited for that. So what we want is the unreasonable. We recommend that the Assembly revise the definition of chronic animal noise to add where such vocalization unreasonably disturbs the peace, quiet, and repose of a person or persons of ordinary sensibility. To allow that discretion for the officer and also the review as well.
Thank
I
you.
think it just might be worth pointing out that this language is reasonable person language. And I'm Lisa Tucson, the administrative hearing officer. Sorry for not identifying myself, but this language is the kind of language that is fairly commonly used by ordinances in other jurisdictions.
Trainee, and Mr. Weddleton.
Just to this point, Jane, would it be good for us to define what a reasonableness is? Or normal peace? We're talking about ordinary sensibilities. They vary from person to person. We've had this problem with marijuana. We've got normal sense of smell written in there. No, that's gone to a hearing officer before. We're using vague terms. Wouldn't it be easier if we had a better construct of exactly what we're talking about, rather than have it go to the hearing officer and then they appeal it to the courts?
Mr. Trainee, I think that the current code is written exactly how you're describing. It doesn't have a reasonable standard in it right now. So the ordinance that reasonableness or unreasonable, nothing has to do with peace and language. So the current code doesn't have anything about reasonableness, just 5 minutes was given to kill.
So from your perspective, is
they've identified how that reasonable means.
this is complete enough for us to pass the game?
Well, it's quite common to have a reasonable standard in many ordinances in criminal law, and things like that, a reasonable person standard. But like you've identified, it's sort of difficult to define precisely the objective standards. It's a subjective standard. The subjective standards that are used in the law. I think that over the course of enforcement, it sort of develops exactly where that line is. Reasonable and unreasonable, given the context and the subject matter. So, just reading this, I couldn't tell exactly what it is, but I think a history of enforcement helps find that.
The next question, again, back on, I'll be quiet, sir. Dan, can your people enforce this so it passes? Do you guys have people
I don't know
doing
the
it?
answer to that question. We used to, prior to 2003, have a reasonable standard in the code, very similar to this language, and it was found that that was somewhat difficult to enforce and was causing most of these noise issues, which are related to parking, to be difficult to handle. The code was changed in 2003 to try to address that, and that's where we got the time standard as opposed to the reasonable standard.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'd be curious to follow up on that issue. Could you give me, I probably wasn't here, I know I wasn't here when you had that standard. Can you give me some instances in which it's difficult to enforce? I'm speaking from just a person who gets a lot of these cases before me and looks at a lot of barking dog cases where the dogs are pretty loud. And in my view, I think that I'm a person of ordinary sensibilities, at least I like to think so. I don't think I would have difficulty in most of the instances I see, including that, yes, this is the type of noise that would offend a person of ordinary sensibilities, and therefore it would fit within the constraints of the kind of violations you're talking about. So I'd just be curious if you could give me some examples.
Yeah, I think the example is that it would take a long period of time to get an enforcement action to occur because you had to prove that this was disturbing someone. You had to prove that it disturbed their peace and privacy. And so folks were having to keep records and logs and things like that in order to basically build a case. And so that made it very difficult. Because the barking is so challenging for many neighbors to have to listen to, it can be one of the most frustrating neighborhood problems.
Well, yeah, I mean, I assume that most of your cases are complaint driven, right?
Yes.
And if it's complaint driven, then isn't it sort of like the fact, basically they have disturbed somebody, they've disturbed a probably reasonable person because you received a complaint about it.
You still have to prove the case. Animal control does have a burden of proof to show that it actually happened.
Well, no, but I mean, yes, you need to still prove the 5 minutes or what have you, but it seems like if you have a complaint and you have the recording or whatever it is to establish this time standard, it seems that in the vast majority of cases you would have reached this unreasonable disturbance standards, except for these very narrow cases where it's like a chicken, I guess. Although chickens can be annoying too.
It can be, and I think that this would account for the circumstances where they are in fact annoying, and where folks in this room, all reasonable people, would probably all agree that there was a disturbance. But can I just add, I agree with you, Assemblyman. I agree with what you're saying, and I think think in most instances in which, Officer Larson's folks come in and bring cases in front of me, almost always the officers ask the question, how does this affect your life? Does this impact your daily existence? And there's a response that's provided, and when you listen to the recordings, in most instances, you totally get it. And in my world, I would look at that and say, yes, that component of that element of that violation has been established. Now, I'm not saying it was in all instances, but I can't think of too many, particularly dog cases, where I totally agree with what has been advanced.
Mr. Weddleton, then Mr. Rivera, then Mr. Dyson.
So a rooster probably doesn't have to crow for 5 minutes, but 4:30 in the morning, their job is to wake the world up. Where would this be here?
I had that case.
You might say, we record this and when people are listening, it's hard, so.
Oh, I'm
you're
sorry.
quiet.
So I've had that case, and I struggled with that case because the situation with the defendant, I don't know if you remember this one, I'm sure you do, Captain Morrison. But we had a situation in which the defendant argued that Title 21 allowed animals considered to be excessively noisy, including roosters, to be kept on lots larger than, what is it, 48,000 square feet, or something, 40,000 square feet. And this gentleman and his wife had a rooster, and it was indeed crowing from time to time on their large lot on the hillside, and the neighbors were very troubled by the noise. And I heard the case, and I did struggle with the fact that I think in the chicken case too, we also had this tension between Title 21, which allows certain types of animals to be held on lots of certain sizes, and then also Title 17, which says that they've got to be sufficiently quiet. They've got to fall within the scope of not committing animal noise. In that case, I held in favor of animal control, and I concluded that Title 21 did not trump Title 17, and that even though you've got a noisy animal like a rooster, which is allowed to be kept on your lot, roosters are, unlike chickens, they're not crowing all the time. They crow from time to time, and you still got to keep them under control enough that they don't crow for 5 continuous minutes within the scope of that ordinance. So, this is certainly reasonable language that would have to be applied to those types of cases too. And I did conclude in that case that I understood what the neighbors were saying because we listened to that recording and it was pretty annoying.
Well, I mean, yeah, this only really apply to you. My girlfriend just got 3 chickens near your house, and one of them turned out to be a rooster, and so she sent it back to the Palmer because I thought roosters were just straight up banned in Anchorage. I didn't realize there was this exception. It would really only apply to your neighborhood. Nobody else has districts or lots that large.
Not large enough.
Have you considered just passing an ordinance to ban roosters?
Well, not if I don't have to, but it would be better in Title 21 to be clear,
Yes.
pay attention to Title 17.
Wholly. And in fact, in many of my decisions that I write, I put something in, like in that case, I don't know if you remember Captain Rising, because I did Captain Rising and read these things, but I did put something in at the end of that decision that recognized that inherent tension between the 2 code provisions and suggested that this would be something that perhaps could be clarified by the English somebody. And I'm happy to
Send me the-
you bet.
you have that
I'll send you
email.
that case.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So you're pro rooster.
Well, I had a neighbor with one and it was fine, but it bothers, I can understand it would bother some people. But we should make it clear.
Yeah, Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So reading through this AM, the second paragraph, second to last sentence talks about how this ordinance is aligned with other jurisdictions' animal noise ordinances and are based on traditional nuisance principles. Could someone walk me through what that is, traditional nuisance principles?
Traditional nuisance, I mean, the very title of this particular provision of the code is animal noise nuisance, if I'm not mistaken. And a traditional nuisance principle, really from the common law, nuisance is defined as an unreasonable disturbance of a person's use of an enjoyment of their property. So the unreasonableness language is under common law. This would essentially track kind of the title of this particular provision with this common law nuisance principle. Does that?
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Mr. Dyson?
Yeah, thank you. I'm very sympathetic with the people who were disturbed So we have a issue in my district where it's the transition of a neighborhood. So in northwest part of the municipality, most folks out there have 2.5 acre lots. They picked that very particularly. There's several prominent dog mushers have dog walks there. They've been there for 30 years. People move in near them, you know, and like the topography in the neighborhood, and then they're bitching and moaning about the dogs doing what they've been doing for 30 years. And we also have quite a few horse people there. The horses that pull the carriages up and down the streets here and everything. And people are griping about smelling horse manure. Or a seaplane base, people throttling up to get off there. And so the new people come in, they should have known that those things were there, and then they start wanting us in government to keep people from annoying them with things that they've been doing for a long time. You can certainly see that. You know, it's like people out here by the airport buy a nice cheap house out there with 0 lot line that are griping about the aircraft. So, is there any provision that in statute and law that allows a kind of a grandfathering for some period of time of a traditional use that people have been doing and prohibiting newcomers from putting them out of business and forcing them to move to the valley?
Can I just ask, you guys are probably, the animal control folks are more familiar with this than I am, but isn't there, I think that mushing facilities go a longer period of time now, and you folks don't pay for noise.
My interior department really, there is already provision outlined here for mushers. They have a separate license. We just enacted that very recently. But
Okay.
it is so that they get 20 minutes 4 times a day for the purpose of loading, unloading, feeding. So they have an exemption as opposed to the average person who just owns multiple dogs.
Yeah, all right. Now I remember that. I hope that mitigates the conflict. But what do we do with planning and zoning and these sort of things in the neighborhoods that are in transition? Those are tough ones. Thank you.
Well, I think it's interesting. We have a case in East Anchorage, which is one of the most densely populated areas of the whole state, where someone just bought a fairly large lot and is turning it into a mushing facility, much to the chagrin of the neighborhood. And whether or not it's legal for them to do that, I think is questionable. But you know, it's funny. I grew up when I was a little kid. There were 3 dog teams. Each of the houses next to me had dogs, so I was just used to dogs all the time, every day. It never bothered me, but I can see if you were living somewhere like East Anchorage or downtown and someone came in with one of those facilities, you'd be pretty upset about it. Okay, is there any other comments on this, Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to call attention to the S version, which exempts dogs from it. To ask if Ms. Becker would comment on if you had an opportunity to look at it.
Wait, is it S version?
Yes, we had spoken to Daryl Hess about a possible S version that would exempt dogs from the reasonable standards, really in the interest of preventing any unintended consequences with this code change, because so many of our complaints, 95%, are related to dogs.
I like that, and I think a dog barking is like de facto annoying if they're going on for 5 minutes.
Deanne, did we send this animal control advisory board the S version? Did they
Not the
respond
S
to it?
version yet, but we certainly could do that.
When do we meet again? Do we know?
The 20th of this month?
Thank you.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, are the majority of the complaints against mushing lots or dogs in just neighborhoods?
Dogs in the neighborhoods for the majority.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this ordinance? So, are you putting forward the S version then?
I would like, thank you, Mr. Chair. would like to talk to the administration and get some more feedback, possibly from the Animal Control Advisory Board as well, and circle back with the ombudsman's office. And we may have to push the vote later.
That's fine. I mean, I think this is not a time-sensitive ordinance. We could do this in January. If it takes that long to get it right, I'm curious to see how much public testimony we're going to get on this. It doesn't seem like there's too many people interested in this particular change. Okay. So, any other discussion about this? Otherwise, we will take a quick break for the next work session. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to participate on this, since we have time on this? Oh, Mr. Slifka.
So speaking as a private person,
Okay.
And as a fully disclosed owner of 7 chickens.
How many roosters?
No roosters.
All right.
Because it's a small lot.
Yeah.
And so the roosters that do show up get shipped to Palmer. I would suggest that I appreciate the work that's being done. I think this is a welcome addition. I would suggest I have also, in my other experiences, had an enormous amount of work with the noise ordinance relative to neighborhoods and facilities, and maybe a suggestion is some sort of a decibel standard might help in that 60, 65 decibels, I think is what we're dealing with right now. And so to the extent that I don't know whether they would have input on that, or that would help to make their judgment.
Mr. Tierney?
Yeah, it is kind of impractical to measure noise that fluctuates, if you will. I mean, they do it for vehicles and whatnot. A typical dog averages 90 to 100 decibels.
Jesus.
And that's average, and that's comparable to a lawnmower, which is actually more tolerable because a lawnmower is a constant drone as opposed to fluctuation. But it would be impractical to put that upon us. Unlimited resources to go out and attempt to measure dog bark.
So we don't use the decibel standard now, or we do?
We do not.
We do not. Okay. Do the lights from South Anchorage High School bother your chickens? Just like that?
Because they're not there. But that's
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But we do, for other noise disturbances, we do measure decibels. Like if somebody has a large party and they're playing loud music, they can go out and light a chicken if it's over a certain level. Is that correct?
There are noise codes that do use decibel levels.
Right. And does that also include boombox cars?
Oh my God. Pete, don't go down this road.
Look into that.
Mr. Gates and I have been working, thinking about that for a while.
We have a neighbor who wants us to ban boomboxes in Anchorage. Would not go over super well. Well, he means car stereos. He wants to ban car stereos. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anyone else on this? Miss Trainee.
I came to this because I have a lot of interest in animal control, and I've on the board for 17, 18 years, and was part of the original rewrite where we rewrote the whole title. And we're bringing up decimal points. We looked at we're spending everything. We read through legal a number of times, and we looked at all these issues, and which there's been some minor changes since then. Since the original rewrite, like I said, that was a real rewrite of everything, and because of the previous, the reasonable of that, we came to the time limit, and we did take considerable testimony and working with mushers to come up to accommodate them. So this has all been looked at for many times and very thoroughly, and there's a lot of work, and I see people have questions aren't familiar with that, but it was quite a project, and it's had tweaks throughout the years. The act has mentioned that that's why we have the current code to meet the legal as well as the needs as we heard complaints from the public on issues.
Thank you, Ms. Trainee. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, seeing none, this work session is closed. We'll start our next one in 3 minutes.